there's this channel, I'll send it to you, that I've been obsessed with. And this guy is super Christian, like knows his shit, like knows his gospels. And he goes around and he lives in Arizona, which I didn't know, but Arizona is one of the most Mormon places. Like Mesa or so is like the most Mormon place other than Utah, maybe more so in recent years. And he goes up to Mormons and he just tells them why they're wrong about it, and like why the original text of the Bible forbids any of the contradictions in the Book of Mormon. In their view, everybody's preparing to be a god, or at least if you're a male, and that you'll have your own planet. So like all of the monotheism of like, this is the one and true God, this is Yahweh, the one and true God, like all of that kind of goes away. And he says, no gods come before me or after. Like they're very clear Bible verses that show that there's not a bunch of different ones. And I think it posits that Jesus is the brothers with Lucifer. It's kind of like this Hollywood retelling of the story. And just like, so he goes through, like very respectfully, like goes through the gospel and the Old Testament and makes the argument. And it's just like, it's got the right amount of like cringe and like awkwardness and discomfort when like people are you could see they're getting angry, but they want to like still pursue civility. And like, there's just so many emotions there that I'm obsessed. Like I'll watch him talk. Yeah, right. Well, I think that's the move. And just, be like, we just need to find Mormons. And I had Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door.
They're just as crazy.
Oh, yeah. So they think that Jesus is actually the Archangel Michael. And that, like...
Okay, so Jesus is God and Michael, or he's just angel?
I don't know. I don't think that they're all up in that Trinity kind of concept.
Yeah, the Trinity never really made that much sense on
it. Is the hardest point to explain. Like, if I wanted to pretend to be a Christian theologian debate, I would have the hardest. They usually go with something like, it's one being, three persons. The Mika.
I don't even. What is the ghost supposed to be? Like, what is the ghost? Like
the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, but what does that represent?
Like the warmth of God, like the end. And let's look it up.
Why is that a thing? Like, I get that there's Jesus, and that's supposed to be like him experiencing how it is to be human, and then he forgives us because he understands that we're just sinners because it's so hard.
Yeah. So in this doctrinal study on the churchofjesuschrist.org, it says the Holy Ghost is the third member of the Godhead. He is the personage of spirit without a body and flesh and bones. He is often referred to as the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God, the Spirit of the Lord.
But what is God? Is God has a body?
Yeah, I guess that's what they're insinuating. That
the Holy Ghost. Is it?
He's an old white man.
He's a huge white man on a cloud.
It's exactly. Wouldn't that be funny if it was exactly correct? Like,
yeah.
It's like, oh shit, they fucking nailed it.
And God's like really pissed that we're all to white guys because he's a white guy, and he's like, fuck you guys, like only white guys are allowed here.
This is ridiculous. Why do you think I put all of them on the continent with tigers?
Why do you think I put them in charge?
Yeah, I could see that coming into play. I could see that. Just in the super Anglo The super Anglo Jesus. I would love to see a Jesus movie where everybody looked like very authentically Middle East, but the baby that was born for Jesus was just like super white. It was like when I
But
was a
I do
baby.
have a question about that. So 2,000 years ago, it was a lot colder, right? Like now we're thinking about it in our temperatures nowadays, but back in those days, maybe
Yeah.
the Middle East wasn't that hot.
And like if you're malnourished, I feel like you just have like a whitish complexion.
Like maybe there, it wasn't a desert. Maybe there's a lot of trees.
Yeah, well, when they describe the Garden of Eden, like it's super tree based and stuff. It's not like the deserts of Iraq. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
like I've seen some beautiful sights in like northern Iraq, like with the mountains and stuff. But like I don't know if there's any kind of just like tree shrubbery kind of things. But I could be being totally ignorant, and they're like giant
But it's like
forests.
those places have been now like you know, in war and have had like major civilizations for a long time now. So maybe like the way it is now is just like we wouldn't even be able to think about it. Like if you see the pictures of like New York City from the 20s or whatever, you're
Mm.
like, there's nothing here. Or even like you look at Brickell in Miami like in 2000 there was nothing, like it was like one building and now it's like a
Yeah.
big
Look at like
area.
Qatar. I think like
Exactly.
Qatar and like those kind of countries were nothing like 20 years ago, and now they're ridiculous like space aged societies, like with cities that
Exactly.
look like they're out of a comic book. So yeah, it's
And on top of that idea, now you know how I always come up with these ideas when we talk. Um, why, if it was like an ice age and that's when humans started to like evolve and develop, why would we be
you need to
black?
plan. Why would we be black if we had to start planning
Yeah,
and
like
stuff?
what? No, like no, during the ice age, like when humans were developing in Africa,
Hmm.
was it that hot in Africa? Like when did it get so hot that like people needed to have black skin? Because if you think
You're
about
right.
it, like if you
You
come
well,
out of an ice age and that's when everything died and that's when our little monkey ancestors came out and started evolving, wouldn't they be light skinned?
yeah, you're not wrong because like we do know that like the Saharan desert and on in like northern Africa was super wet and had a lot of trees and had a lot of that stuff. Um, yeah, so it was.
Maybe we were
Hmm,
all like brown, and then
okay,
the Africans became blacker, and then we became whiter.
yeah, so they're saying that like Americans, they're saying that those that a lot of humans left Africa when it was shifting from that point, like 50 to 60,000 years ago, of like wet to dry. So you're right; it would have been a lot more, a lot wetter, at least in like more trees and stuff. So yeah, it's conceivable that they weren't as black. I think that's safe to say that they probably weren't as black as well we know a black person can get to.
Exactly, because like
Currently.
the Fertile Crescent or whatever, like those people are more like Middle Eastern looking. They're not super brown, but then like the farther down in Africa, you get like the more darker they get. So like
Yeah,
where was humanity like started in Africa? Was it up at the top or was it like
I think it was in like in the. I've always thought in the smack in the middle.
that would make sense. The capital of Africa.
Yes. Let me say, which part of Africa? Yeah, so it looks like just, do you know, like the fat part? You know, way Africa is like
Yeah.
that and then down. Like I'd say just at the start of the fat part. So like 3/4 of the way up or so. So that makes sense. So pretty darn close to like Egypt and what was going on there. Have you ever seen like the I don't want to get too off the tangent of it. Like, but like it is crazy when you think about it, like you were just saying the Middle East, like how many things have happened there. And like now Africa's been human filled for 100,000 years. Look, sometimes I just think about like what is it like in a world or country where there's that much blood in the ground? Like does it have, is it bad juju to use the
Well, also, like, if you think about it, like, Africa still has mostly Africans living there. Europe
mhm,
mostly has Europeans. Like,
yeah,
we came to America. America was full of millions of natives.
mhm,
Millions. They had their own, like nations and stuff, and we just killed them all. Like, you barely even see Native Americans anymore. Like, there's,
yeah,
like, reservations and things like that, but like the amount of people that got killed like on this soil not even that long ago, like a couple hundred years ago. And
yeah.
we're like living on land that we probably shouldn't be, like from evolutionary like an evolutionary standpoint.
Yeah, it's true. And we've been talking about just like how accurate is the depiction of these groups in our history. I mean, going like objectively, if you go through history, everybody who's destroyed another nation and like killed, really genocided an entire group of people had like negative viewpoints on them and like a
Mhm.
real bias against them. And when you think about all the examples in history or now, like how maybe it's not even maybe they were a lot more advanced than we give them credit to. And like you wouldn't do a lot of research and trying to prove how advanced these people were if you just killed them too. Like you really wouldn't waste your time making yourself look worse in
Yeah.
front of the public. So yeah, it's funny how a planet goes that there's just you have so many bad things, and sometimes is there a point that you just can't go past it? Like is it too bad, or are there too many tensions? We've been talking about like the importance of consent in not a sexual context, but like in a governmental context. That like even when we talk about dictatorships or monarchies or anything throughout history, the nastiest leader had a small group of people with weapons and power, and he's likely, could be ruling over hundreds of thousands of people very early in history. And if those people decided that we no longer want to be run by this king, that would be the end of that king. And you see that throughout history. So every society has to figure out a way to emotionally keep its people under control and give itself some some credibility. I suppose is the word, that you don't want all
Distract
your,
them.
yeah, you don't want all your credibility to be power. That's going to be a very tough thing. Like if the only
Yeah.
the lifetime that people want you, or that people will do what you want, is when you could directly threaten their life and
Well,
their
you see that
family
with
and their,
the royal family. That's
yeah.
how they stayed alive, is that when monarchies were falling, they went around and pretended that they were best friends with everybody, that they were
Mm.
like charity workers and, do-gooders instead of colonizers.
Yeah, and throughout history and throughout like English history, there have been kings who set up tourneys and you make events and you have these stories that that singers tell about the king. And you put this idea that this guy was chosen by God and he's here because by virtue of just being a great soul that's been picked and all of this, and you kind of push it out there, and then the years go by, and now we're seeing the royal struggle with figuring out how to continue that kind of control. People always trivialize the power of the royals, especially in this kind of post-liberal world where you figure, oh well, they're just fun and they just have outfits. I think they might be in the top 5 landowners in England. They
They're
the
making a
numerous
killing.
yeah, the numerous companies, like they're not jokes. They really are. They're doing very well. So yeah, we've been.
And if you
I
think
think
about
it's
it, that's what the monarchy wanted to start off with. It wanted
yeah.
money, power, and they have that without any responsibility. We have given them the best parts. They can be rich, they can get tax dollars, they can go around and be paraded like they're actual leaders, like they didn't just get born into the position. Like the fact that Charles has to meet with
The
um,
prime
the
minister.
prime minister. It's all ridiculous, and they get like the best of both worlds. And this is the whole issue you see with governments all over is that people don't trust them because they know these kind of things happen. Now you have the internet, and you have people like us talking on podcasts and making people open their eyes to the way that we're all being manipulated.
Yeah, so why do you think the people, and we'll do it for England and we'll do it for America, but like, so for England, what what do you think the people get out of that story of William the Conqueror? And then this passes on throughout these years, and this king, and his family, and it comes down now to this kind of obviously creepy Charles with a creepy pedophile brother, and his mom seemed awesome. Like Elizabeth, I just from being a Crown fan, I like, but
Yeah.
it's so weird, and like something about that. Just maybe it's not so much the content as just like anything that unifies people is important for a country. So, like, at the very least, they had that. They were different classes, they were all different things, but they had this one unified story that they were the English people. And
Even though they're German.
even though they're, or Normans, yeah. Yeah, and and that kind of worked. And I think for America, we have this democracy, so that kind of gives the people credibility. But now we're kind of at a point now that, and I think it's the most exciting time because like Democrats and Republicans, or better to just say like more conservative or more left leaning people, are all extremely dissatisfied. Like nobody feels like they're winning right now, and I think that's because we're not really doing a representative government. Like the way our country behaves as a whole
Or
doesn't
maybe
really
it means that we are because nobody's happy in a
nobody.
compromise. Like that's the reality. If neither side feels like they're really winning, maybe they are.
There just seems like so much dissatisfaction of like, in the same way that we were just saying with England, that you have this common story of like your history and your future. And like I think that maybe the entire world right now is struggling with exactly where we're thinking about our history and the negatives that have occurred and where we came from. We're thinking about where to go forward in the next direction, and there's just so little agreement on that. Not like, I think that increases the radicalization of like people, that you have more Nazis coming out now, like more legitimate, not just the guy that you call a Nazi, like legitimate Nazi. And at the same time, more of like you're like I'm an extreme communist.
Yeah, I think it's also like you see with climate change, with the COVID ruining economies, everybody is kind of stressed out, and at least it seems that there's a more limited resources and supplies for like things that people need. And I think that in general is just always going to ignite people's divisiveness because if you feel like there's only so much, you're going to be more, um, careful about who you want to have those resources.
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen a lot of economists talk about the world really crashing once we get to a certain number of people. And it's tough in a place where scarcity is not really a thing, like in Boca Raton, Florida, or Miami, Florida, where you can go to a store right now, like within 20 minutes, you could have enough you could have enough like material to build a boat and food for a year. Like if you just went out and got it. Like the amount of things that you could just get here. Me, it sounds odd, but then you hear about these cities, even in America, that don't have water, that they can't get there. You remember how many days it took them after Katrina to get
Hmm.
people water? Like it's all a lot more fragile than we think, even in our country. So I can't imagine what it's like in the third world. They might be a bad afternoon away from millions and millions of people dying,
Yeah,
just from
they
nature.
actually starve in those countries.
Yeah, yeah, and when you see the people who try to put aid into Africa and the Middle East, it's just every year the problem just gets worse and worse because so many people are born. Um, do you think that it's moral to have an airborne contraception?
Um, I would say it depends on what your morals are. If your morals are to keep population
Utopianism,
from
yeah.
being, out of control, then yes. But I think also like we all have individual freedoms, and that's something that people take as like a moral, to have those freedoms, and that's definitely taking it away.
Yeah, for sure. I think we could probably agree on that.
But honestly, I think that and you saw this even in America, like during slavery, and we've talked about it, where they stopped shipping in slaves and they started just
Mhm.
breeding people. And I think that we talk about Africa and we make it seem like, oh, these Africans are just like going out and having sex everywhere. And we don't think about like that our electric cars and our phones have these materials that people are still digging by hand in Africa for, and they are being treated like slaves in the present day, and I'm sure they are still being bred in a certain kind of way, whether it's, putting them in situations where they're all cramped together and they're not given any kind of birth control or anything like that. Like
Or
it's
opportunity. Mhm.
exactly like they're definitely promoting that kind of behavior, and I think we can't put materials and be like, oh, we're going to go to Africa and help these people when they're being exploited because those resources that we're giving them is just going to be sucked out of them. So we're just going to end up by giving them something, they're just going to have that taken away by the people that are exploiting them as workers.
Yeah, one of the things that I remember kind of the first time I even thought about it was probably not until like my mid to late 20s, but kind of from this Northeast kind of liberal optimism place, I always thought like it's just this choice that if we can maneuver like if we can change things, that these countries in the developing countries would be able to improve on their human rights and their standard of living and all these things, and that the world wouldn't need to change. But what I kind of came to the conclusion of is that you have you have the society built like we have it today, with the costs being what they are today. And that's because of all that oppression. That the reason our goods cost what they do instead of many multitudes more is because somebody's living a very poor life in
Hmm.
another area, and they're kept under a more despotic, authoritative leader who America endorses because we have a beneficial trade kind of relationship. And you saw this all through the Middle East with oils, and you see it all throughout Africa with the mining that you're talking about. And all of these benefits that we live do come at the back. I think sometimes people get carried away with like exploitation that like anything that somebody does positive, like a rich person, is intrinsically negative to the working class. Like I don't think
Hmm.
that's always true. But I think in terms of global politics, that there's some real truth to that. That like this we can't continue in this need to progress every year and need the stocks to go up and need just this constant growth in the economy or else it all crashes and
Yeah.
still not have that kind of craziness going on around the world.
It's kind of like a dilemma that like a progressive or a liberal has, because by empowering people in other countries who they don't want you to not buy things from Nike or whatever, they want to just be paid more and have people be willing to pay more for the product so that they could have a more living wage. However, if you do that, then the people that live in America who are already paycheck to paycheck, they're even worse off because the prices of goods start to go up and they don't
Yeah,
have the money. So it's like there's this issue. It's like you help one and then then this part over here starts to like go under,
that's such a
and then it's
good
like
point.
you have to
Yeah.
constantly be worrying about who is being exploited in a situation, because in a world where there's only so much, you can't have billion and trillionaires without really poor people. Like, we want to believe that everybody can just have as much as they want, but that's not a reality.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, like our working class has nothing. They borrow money once a month, then they give back that money over the course of the month, and then they borrow more money,
Hmm.
and then or with their job even, and they receive a certain amount of money, they give it, they get it back, they give it back. Like their net never really changes. They have nothing, and then they have enough for that month, and then they just kind of continue in that manner. So, but yeah, I thought the point was great about just you're like, oh, change the world and make these places more fair and equitable, and then it's almost an elitist standpoint because you could afford that fresh market or Whole Foods organic um,
Exactly.
and you can't feed your family, and like if you're a single mom or anybody, when you can't constantly go organic with everything. So it's yeah, it's tough. It really is tough to know like what the move is, and I think that's why when people talk about the Great Reset, sometimes it's like a conservative conspiracy theory of like the end of the world. But I think that it's worth looking at. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
seem sustainable what we're
Well, there's
currently.
going to be a reset whether we want it to be resetted or not. At a certain point, it's not
Yeah,
going to work anymore and it's going to break. But I think the problem is that even if we reset it, do we have a better plan? Like, because if you have everybody, like, we know socialism doesn't 100% work, and we also see now that capitalism doesn't 100% work. Having government control doesn't necessarily work, but also having complete democracy doesn't necessarily work. So it's like, how do you find this perfect balance that has never existed before, as far as we know? Because if it did, it'd still be around. So we're trying to create this perfect balanced world that we have never experienced other than maybe nature, and we're destroying that.
yeah, yeah. It's hard to imagine that if you could take away everybody's history and everybody's memory and everything, that we would come to what we have in our world is a tokenization of shiny things. for the most part, and that kind of like said everything. Of course, that they were shiny things and they were rare, and we arbitrarily attached some kind of value to that, and then society became this game of like every group trying to get the most shiny objects, and that's kind of evolved into the
Or
system.
whatever's rare.
Yeah, like I can't imagine. I'm thinking of like creatures on Neptune, and like I can't imagine like it coming down to something so silly, like so trivial and arbitrary as just the consuming of wealth, which is kind of what we have. And like, not to get, I think we're both pretty free market people. Like, we're both business owners. Like, we're not not Marxist, but it just seems like if you had unlimited time, if we have another like 2,000 years, I just can't imagine us still going this route of like I'm a free market capitalist, and like still with the same level of developing countries doing horribly, and like
Yeah.
I just it's not sustainable. So I think moving forward, it will be interesting. In the same way that I'm sure people in the feudal era couldn't possibly understand like what goes on in now. Maybe in 100 years or so, like we wouldn't be able to recognize what kind of system um, what was there. I think we're going to start to see more guaranteed income, like the EBI.
But where does it come from?
I guess that taxes.
So the people who are working are gonna have to pay money for everybody to like stay home. Like that's the problem with like all of these things is like to just have a world where people can survive and live happy lives without having to work hard or like really try is like what would happen if we were completely like sympathetic to people because certain people just don't have the will to really try to be successful in what successful means in this day and age. Maybe mental health or they just are better with less. But I mean, still, you don't want to have a world where people don't feel like they're able to get ahead no matter how much work they do.
We've been looking at the like the open source AI, the Chat GPT, and it's wild what this thing produces. Like I did some English tutoring in college, and this thing's better than any student. Like if a student gave me a paper that this thing produced when they were in their freshman year of college, I would have been fine with it. I would have been totally happy. Like, oh, you're a really good writer. You're a good writer. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing. No, it's not too deep in there, but it's got the concepts. I would have been impressed. I would have been impressed.
Yeah.
And like now, it's at that point now. This thing's not even really connected to the internet in terms of like what it could read. They've just uploaded a ton of text in there. So it's not even live in the sense of it being connected. It can be and it will be connected to a live internet to feed, and it's just going to keep getting smarter and smarter. And you get to a point. It's so conceivable to think that a law agency or a law firm couldn't just get a supercomputer that has a thorough understanding of
Like
every
all
law.
of the law
Yeah.
textbooks.
And it just produces this freaking essay that gets handed to a judge. The other side, for their AI, they might be competing on who's got a better AI. They give their AI report, and maybe the judge is an AI program that determines the validity of like which one of these is better. But like that's totally conceivable, and that's like that high end job. Being not like I think detectives, it could just be like, oh, I input this information and then the detective AI figures it out. But all these like high level jobs, doctors with the robotics that people are able to do, I think they've already done heart surgeries by AI and things. They're going to be able to do it better than everybody. So if you could do those jobs, you're going to take. We were always worried about like, oh, burger flippers are going to be replaced with robots with spatulas on their hands, and they're going to go. Like, no, it's so much scarier than that. It's so much
Yeah,
worse than that. It's
it's
everything.
everything.
Yeah, it's everything. So like what, like I don't know what society does at a point where tomorrow they're just like everybody is without a job. No matter what you do, there's an AI that's better at it than you, and everybody just gets you. You get your
Maybe
two
we just keep
thousand a
getting
month.
like, maybe we just keep getting weaker and weaker until like we all like just die off, like nobody is reproducing, like everybody's like desire for life is kind of dwindled because there's nothing to like really do. Like when everything is done for you,
Yeah,
what fun is life? Like you're basically not able to live and try to do things for yourself. So maybe like if those like that one show we were talking about a couple weeks ago, about how humanity's had like all these different apocalypses
yeah,
and
yeah.
that we forgot about it. Maybe this keeps happening where we get really crazy technology and then people realize that technology is not the way because it destroys everybody's way of life and they
See,
destroy it and they go back and live in the
it's
woods.
so funny that you said that because somebody on my libertarian kind of news feed said almost exactly the same thing. And like when he goes, so instead of pretty much exactly what you just said, like instead I think it's like the Furman or this Furman's theory or something about like why we never see aliens, that like they eventually kill each other or off or like something. But like he's like, what if instead they just like every society becomes communist at a certain point? And then it's so funny. So yeah, I think like that's totally conceivable that like at a certain point like people are just like, okay, like if we get any more powerful, if we get powerful enough to bend the galaxy and to go here, like we're gonna kill each other in like just over some stupid shit. So like we need to figure this out. Like maybe nobody should have this, and we could just like go back to living like Ewoks in Return of the Jedi, when they're just
Yeah.
like
I mean,
little
that
like
already sounds
villages.
like a better life to like go and try to like survive like Native Americans or something. I think a
Yeah,
lot of people would love to do that.
because could you imagine how sick, like, what a beautiful society if you can combine like the medical advances and the germ understanding and like stuff that we have now, but in like a more primitive way, but like a little bit safer.
Yeah. There
A
should be
little
like
more.
cities for the people who want like the modern technology world. You have that, and then everything around it is just like crazy jungle that people just live in tribes. And if you really want like something crazy, you go to like this really high tech city.
What was the what was it? I think it was it a Brave New World when it's kind of like there are cities and stuff, but then there are like these like little like like what you're describing,
I think
where
it
it's like
is,
just
yeah.
when there's this like this lack of civilization, but then like he eventually like goes and he loves that. And like it reminds me of the Wild West, and there are so many of those stories where the people, like so many people wanted to become Native Americans. Like so many settlers and stuff wanted to live that life,
Mm-hmm.
and like they had trouble going the other direction of like those people like having a house and having a family and living all that. Like there was something beautiful to just like living on the land and stuff. I know it's like romanticizing it, and like I don't know how I would do in a tent or stuff, but like there's definitely there's something to it, with that. Like there's a real connection to your people too. That just feels secure. We've talked about like schizophrenia, how like schizophrenia is very rare in countries where it's a lot more communal.
Mm-hmm.
That this brain issue, the schizotaxic brain issue that gets worse in isolation doesn't come about as much in these non-Western countries where
And if you
somebody could
think about
just
it, that makes sense because it's like a serotonin disorder. And when you're around people that you love, like that's love,
yeah.
part of it is serotonin. So I think that when you don't have like that social connection and you don't have that group, that in group that you feel connected to, and you get that serotonin from just being around, maybe that is like some of the issues that we see with like depression or
Yeah.
schizophrenia and all these things that are linked to serotonin in general.
Did you get a chance to take a look at the Simone Weil thing?
Yeah, I was listening to it and it's very interesting. I want to listen to like one of her books.
Yeah, like her idea, and she kind of comes from this group that came about in the immediate aftermath of like Nazi Germany. So it's like more left wing, like it's associated with even like the Marxists and things moving forward. But you can understand why, as a French person, while Nazis were occupying your city, you could have like a real strong resentment towards like right wing
Yeah.
ideologies. So, so it makes a lot of sense. But what she talks about, I think it's such a shame that like people like her or Adorno or DeBoer or all these people in that camp, is that like the conservatives and the right completely discount them and just disrespect them because they came from this Marxist school. But I think that their critiques about the disenfranchisement of everybody in a society, and she called it like this rootless society, where I can't imagine a conservative not completely agreeing that the problems with our country is that we've kind of deconnected from the roots of what we came from. We don't have a history that we agree on. We don't have a future we agree on. Like whether you're left or right, like you have to see that that there's a psychological dismay in America, and especially with the youth, that like people don't know what to do, so they're freaking out. And like I think that has a lot to do with that. There's no clear, humans are social creatures, there's no clear like society that you could like be part of and together and know that you're working to further the goals, and that you're not just being completely alienated or just left out from society. And I
Yeah.
wonder how much that causes like the school shootings and the mass shootings. Like if you had a society that just forced these people who were struggling to still be like part of it, and they still had a contributing element. It's tough in our modern world to feel like you're contributing to society. Like even if you're working, like it's easy to just feel exploited and kind of out of it and not really helping anybody. So I wonder, I think that was kind of one of her main points, was just that like there's a lot of psychological distress. There's like a need to belong and know that you contribute, and there are very few societies around the world that really do a good job with getting everybody involved with that.
Yeah, and I think the fact that she like put herself in situations where she could really experience things and like know what people are feeling instead of just, going around and assuming that
Yeah,
she understands what people are feeling.
the Karl Marx kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
he never had a job, but like he wrote
Like Bernie
consistently.
Sanders.
Yeah, 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 that's true. Yeah, I remember the pictures of Ernie when he was there, but it's like maybe they're the reason that they're not resonating completely, or is that they're not completely accurate, and perhaps that's the difference between studying and really experiencing
Yeah.
what was going on. So it's yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in our world, whether or not we'll figure it out. Hopefully people will watch this episode and come away with a thorough understanding of togetherness.
Or at least
Unity.
they'll be questioning some of the things that maybe they never have before.
Yeah, yeah. I think we bounce around like the political spectrum a lot. I think just by being like questioning a lot, you kind of end up on all different points. And I think that like one of Vi's main contributions towards the end was this idea of like try to remove all your biases and it's impossible, but it's like try it, of like interpreting information without all of your preconceived notions and emotions, and it's you'll benefit a lot more. I think just by vilifying an entire other group, like there are so many things in our society that impact every single person, no matter where they are in the political spectrum, and make the quality of life worse for these people in a psychological way. Like I think it's important to just be kind and kind of empathize a little bit more with people. Like, don't
Agreed.
always look at things in that left or right kind of duality. And
Yes.
that's the lesson of the day.
I like ending it on that note.